Hello everyone and welcome to the Cloud Migration for Beginners. My name is Nicola and I'm a software developer, and one of the areas that I'm working on is cloud migration tooling. Together with me I have Ricardo.
Yeah, thank you. I am Ricardo indeed, a software engineer from the control plane team in Business Central. Our team also deals, besides cloud migration, also with the environment administration features.
So we have prepared a lot of content for you that we will try to fit within approximately 1 hour time frame. We are going to start with the introduction, where we are going to show to you all of the important concepts around the cloud migration, and you will be able to see how does the cloud migration looks end to end. And then for the next part, we are going to go through the steps that are necessary to be done for the cloud migration. So we will show you how you can prepare for the cloud migration, how to set it up and replicate the data, important things around the data upgrade, and how do you complete the cloud migration and go live. And we are going to end with troubleshooting section. One important thing that I would like to say before we begin is that some functionality we are going to explore in depth. However, some functionality we are going to only mention with a reference to the documentation, so you can read it on your own, and this is because it would not fit the time frame. So for the introduction, we are going to start with the why should you use the cloud migration tooling. I'm going to show you some end-to-end flow, how does it look like, and we are going to end up discussing which possible cloud migration paths are available. For why you should use the cloud migration tooling, there are two main reasons, and they are that it is the fastest and safest way to migrate the on-prem data into SaaS. The reason why it is the fastest way is because it is using SQL to SQL copy. So it is going to take one SQL database, and by using technology which is named Azure Data Factory, it is going to use it to move the data from the on-prem database into the SaaS database. If we compare this to some other tooling like Rapid Start or any other AL-based solution, SQL to SQL copy is much faster. The second reason why we would recommend you to use the cloud migration tooling is because it is the safest way to run the cloud migration. We have streamlined the process. It has been used by the thousands of partners. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you how many migrations exactly we had, but it is counted in tens of thousands of unique cloud migrations. For these reasons, we have invested a lot in preventing you from making mistakes, because discovering mistakes after going live can be quite costly to fix. So the tooling is built to highlight all of the mistakes that you can do and to prevent you from actually making them and not realizing that you have done the mistake. We have also looked into which data should be replicated and which should be left on-prem for all of the Microsoft tables. So you're going to be moving only the data that is necessary to the cloud. And at the end, the tooling is capable to detect data issues. In some cases, it can autocorrect them. And in case that it cannot autocorrect the issues, it's going to highlight them either as errors or as warnings. As I have said, we have a large community of partners that is using it, which is also able to help you with some tips and tricks around the tooling. So I would recommend to you to check out the documentation, because we have listed a lot of information here. Also, after you have read it for the first time, I would recommend to come from time to time and to check for updates, because we are constantly updating the documentation with useful information. One of the things I would really like to ask you to do is to join us on Yammer. As you can see, we have a large community here, almost 1,200 partners that are active on this channel. So if you have any problems, you can ask the question here. You can reach out to us with the feedback or any questions that you have. And it's also an excellent way to interact with the other partners that are doing the cloud migration and to share the experiences. So this was all for why should you use the cloud migration tool that we have shipped. And now I'm going to show you how does the process look like end to end. So here I have a recording ready, because this process would take approximately 40 minutes, and we are going to speed it up so you will be able to see how does it look like. To access the cloud migration tooling, you simply search for it on the Cloud Migration Management. And when you go to this page here, you will see that we have raised the notification that can take you to the setup wizard. On this step, only thing that you need to do is to choose the product from which you are migrating. For this demo, we are going to choose the earlier version of the Business Central, because we want to migrate the database that is coming from 14. On the next step, I need to provide the SQL connection string. In the tooltip, you can see how it is looking like, so you can define it in an easy way. I'm going to quickly copy-paste it for this demo because I have it ready. So when I enter the SQL connection string here, when I invoke the next action here, then we are going to create the Azure Data Factory pipeline, and we will give you the access key for it. Because we are using on-prem SQL Server here, you will need to configure it. If you were using Azure SQL Database, it would not be necessary. Ricardo is going to talk about it a bit more. So here we are waiting for it. And on this step, we are going to give you the instructions on how you can set up the integration runtime on your box to expose the on-prem database to the Azure Data Factory. The first step that you would need to do is to download and install the integration runtime, because we are using the on-prem SQL. And then when it installs, you can copy-paste the authentication key. There will be a small window where you can provide it, and that is going to connect it to the Azure Data Factory. For the time reasons, I have already done this, and I have pre-installed the integration runtime, which also allows me to show you one cool thing. Many partners are actually reinstalling the integration runtime if they want to change the key. That is not necessary because you can use PowerShell to change the runtime, to change the connection that the integration runtime is using. So to do this, you simply define the R key like a variable like here. And then you can use a PowerShell script that is coming with the integration runtime. It's called like register integration runtime, and you provide the gateway key that you have just defined above. And if you run it like this, then it is going to reconfigure the integration runtime that is already installed to connect to the different Azure Data Factory pipeline. So this is going to save you a significant amount of time if you're running multiple cloud migrations. So if you run this PowerShell script, you can see that the integration runtime is connecting to the service. Now it has connected. So if I go back to the client, and if I invoke next, now the integration runtime is going to try to read the on-prem database. And if we rewind the video a little bit, because this takes like 10 to 15 seconds. And here you can see it's successfully connected. We see the on-prem companies. We are going to select all of them. And now we can finish the wizard. The migration has been set up. It can take you directly to the UI, so you can manage the cloud migration like here. And the status that you can see here is that it is creating companies. So we are going to automatically create all of the companies that you have selected on the wizard. And this step we recommend that you do immediately after you provision the tenant, because it can save you time when you decide to do the go-live migration. There is no need to wait for the creation of the companies, which can take a few hours if you are moving 20 or 30 companies. If you go for the companies page, here, you will see that the companies are created and the status has changed ready for application. And now we can start moving the data to SaaS. So when you say that you want to start the data replication, now the replication process is going to start. And you can track it on this page by invoking refresh status action that is here. So if we invoke this refresh status action a few times, after like 5 to 10 minutes, it's going to connect, and you can see that we have 1,662 tables to copy. So if we rewind the video a little bit, this number is going to start going down, and you can see that the number of tables successful is going to start increasing. So if we are rewinding it, and here, the thing that you can see is that we have successfully copied all of the tables. The number is a little less than 1,600, and that's because we don't report the tables that had no date in them. Then, if I tried to complete the cloud migration and go live, the thing that I'm going to get is that I cannot do it because I did not run the upgrade. and I'm migrating from 14. And to fix that, I can invoke the run data upgrade action, and we are going to warn you that you need to do this as a last step. We are going to be talking about it a bit more later. Then, if you invoke the upgrade like this, the thing that is going to happen is that you're going to lose the access to the environment. Because we will move the tenant into the maintenance mode, and the only session that is going to be running on the tenant is the upgrade session. And this is great because you're not going to get any data locks, there will not be any instabilities. And the last thing that I would like to say, you're also getting an automatic rollback in case the upgrade fails. So you can patch the data. While it is running, you can track the status in the Business Central Admin Center. You can see that the data upgrade is running here, and in case it fails, you'll also get an error here together with a stack trace. So if we run it a little bit more, as you can see here, the upgrade has succeeded. So if we go back to the tenant and if we refresh this window here, we are going to get the access back. So the tenant is loading. And if we go to the Cloud Migration Management page, you can see that the upgrade has completed successfully. So now we are able to invoke complete the cloud migration and do the actions that we need to do before going live. So if I invoke this action, then the cloud migration is going to stop. We will deprovision all of the pipelines and we will mark it as completed. So as you have seen, we have moved 3 companies in approximately 12 minutes. So this is how long it took to copy. So the tooling itself is actually quite quick. Okay, so that was all for the demo of the end-to-end cloud migration. And the last topic for the introduction is what are possible migration paths that you can use for the cloud migration. So if you're planning to do the SaaS cloud migration and the customer is on version that is before 14, the first step is to upgrade to 14. 14 is the lowest version that we support for direct on-prem upgrade or for the direct cloud migration. From 14 and also from all of the versions that are before 23, you can do a single step upgrade to the latest version. And then from the latest version, you can simply replicate to SaaS, or from all of these versions that are from 14 to 22, you can do a direct cloud migration and then run the missing upgrade in SaaS. To put it in words, you need to upgrade to version 14, and then you can either replicate directly to SaaS and run the upgrade in SaaS, or you can run the on-prem upgrade to the latest version and then replicate data to SaaS. We are often getting questions, which option is better? Option 1 is much simpler because you simply connect the SQL database as you have seen in the demo. You replicate the data and then we will run the upgrade for you. Option 2 is more complex for you because you need to do more work, but it's giving you more control over the upgrade process because you're running it on-prem. Usually, the partners are using on-prem upgrade for large tenants because it is going to give them more control and optimizations over the upgrade process, while the smaller tenants are simply copied to SaaS and directly upgraded. We are going to write a dedicated documentation topic around moving the large tenants with tips and tricks how you can optimize the speed because we are getting a lot of questions in this area. And for the last thing, for the cloud migration upgrade flows, we have an important upgrade strategy announcement. And this is that we are stopping the direct upgrade and cloud migration path from Dynamics Business Central 14 in approximately a year and a half from now. So in April 2025, together with version 26, it will not be possible to cloud migrate or directly upgrade from version 14 to version 26. The reason why we are doing this is because we need to remove obsoleted fields and tables. We have not been cleaning up objects in a very long time, actually from version 12. So the amount of data that we need to clean up is quite large. And the second reason why we need to do this is because of the delocalization effort that we are doing. We are trying to move all of the localizations into separate extensions. And for this, we will need to move the tables up and down. And for both of these efforts, if we delete any SQL objects, we cannot support a direct cloud migration or upgrade path. To explain this one in a little bit more details, so when we start working on version 26, we are going to start with introducing the breaking SQL changes, and we will delete the upgrade methods that were there. So you will see all of the changes that we did when we start working on version 26. And when version 26 is released, then version 25 is going to become a jump build. This means that from all of these versions before 25, you will need to upgrade to 25. Then from 25, you will be able to upgrade to 26 on-prem and replicate the data, or you will be able to replicate the data from 25 and run the upgrade in SaaS directly from version 25. We are planning to introduce these jump versions or to delete the objects every 5 versions. So the next jump version would be 30. So there will be a necessary upgrade step every 5 versions. So this is the current plan that we are bringing to you because we would like you to be ready to plan and to adjust. If you have any feedback for us, please reach out and let us know how is this change affecting you. All right, so this was all regarding the introduction, and now we are going to move into the preparation step. When you're preparing for the cloud migration, essentially you need to do 2 steps. One is to align the SQL table definitions, and the second one is to clean up the data. Aligning the table definitions seems very complex. In reality, it's quite simple, because you only need to take care of 2 things. The first thing that you must do is that you need to align the primary keys. So the primary keys in the source table and in the destination table must match exactly. The second thing that you need to do is that you need to make sure that the field name and the field type is matching in the source and in the target. If there is a difference in the name and type, we are going to throw an error. It's possible to move the data with different lengths, so we can move the shorter lengths into the longer fields. That is not going to be seen as a breaking change. Everything else is optional. So if we have customized fields here, we can skip them. If you have different table names, we can handle them through the table mappings. So you will be able to map the tables in the UI, and the engine will be able to move them. Also, if you have customizations that you would like to move out of the main tables, as many people on-prem have, into the table extensions, the cloud migration tooling is able to do this through simple table mappings, and we are going to show you how does this one work in a few moments. The tool is completely ignoring everything else. So IDs, if they are different, the tool does not care about them because these properties are stored in the object metadata, and we are going to ignore any other differences. When you are aligning the fields, one of the things that you will probably need to do is that you will need to introduce 3-letter prefixes or suffixes to the field names, and many partners have already done this. So many questions that we are getting here is how can we introduce these 3-letter prefixes in an easiest way? Essentially, there are 3 options that you can do. You can align the definitions in CIL, because CIL is only looking at IDs when you're doing the renames. So in case that you want to do this, you can import a FOB with renames as a separate upgrade step and force sync the changes. And then CIL is going to keep the data in this case if the IDs stay the same. Option number 2 is probably used by most of the partners. You can use SQL scripts to alter the table definitions, or you can also use them to copy the data from the old schema onto the new schema. Because, as I have said, the cloud migration tooling is simply just looking at the SQL definitions. It's not looking at any other object properties. And the last option is if you're a large partner that is running on-prem upgrade as well, you can use the data transfer objects, so you can move the data from the old fields into the new fields. Data transfer object is essentially a SQL query, so it's quite fast in moving the data. So that was all for aligning the SQL definitions. So for the next topic is cleaning up the data. One big ask that we have for you, and you can do this task even before starting the cloud migration, is to run invoke nav sanitize field commandlet to eliminate non-printing characters from code fields. Many customers that have been running on our product for decades, they have non-printing characters in code fields like new line characters. And SQL Server is not able to support these characters. So if you cloud migrate with these, it's possible in SaaS also to sanitize the data, but I would strongly recommend that you do this step even before starting the cloud migration, because you can clean up their production database and they will be happy to get rid of this data corruption that is coming from many, many years ago. The second thing to check is, as code fields can have non-printing characters, so can company names. So make sure that there are no special characters or trailing spaces. If you leave them, then you will see that the replication is failing for these specific companies. Second thing that you can use for cleaning up the data are the date compression and archiving reports that we have in the product. We have a page which is called Data Administration page, and it has ID of 9035. And here we have basically put all of the reports that you can use for data cleanup or data compression. So it's good so you get an overview which reports are there. Most of these reports, they exist in all of the versions of BC and NAV, so you can use them even in these products. However, you need to navigate to them because this data administration page may not be available. So this task you can also do before going live on the production database to clean up the data as much as possible and to shrink the data set so the upgrade and the cloud migration goes smoother. All right, so that was all about the introduction and preparation. Ricardo, can you show us the setup?
Yes, so that was great so far. We want to give a closer look now into what are the building blocks of the cloud migration infrastructure. So basically, let's jump into what's happening behind the hood of cloud migration. So just to give a very high-level introduction, of course, when we talk about cloud migration, there's the assumption that there's always a source environment. That would be a Business Central on-premise installation where you have your own SQL Server database, and a destination Business Central online environment that's basically with an Azure SQL database. So let's figure out what's happening in between when we run cloud migration. So the main technology we rely on is the Azure Data Factory, which is an Azure cloud-based data integration service that takes care of moving and transforming the data across different data sources. And the main component that Azure Data Factory relies on is pipelines, so-called pipelines. And what are these pipelines? They are basically just a chained grouping of activities, and each of them can either take care of indeed moving, transforming, or controlling the flow of the data. Next, the next component is the integration runtime. This makes up the compute layer of the cloud migration infrastructure. And in this setup, where we have indeed an on-premise installation of our Business Central, we require to install a self-hosted integration runtime, which means this will actually be installed within the private network where the SQL Server database lives. And on the Azure side, we also have an Azure integration runtime. And both of these will take care, on one side, to pull the data outside of the Business Central environment on-prem and bring it into the cloud. On another hand, it is also possible to perform cloud migration from already a database that is already in the cloud, for example, an Azure SQL database. And in such case, there will not be a self-hosted integration runtime, but an Azure integration runtime again, so that the whole process will take place fully in the cloud. Also worth mentioning, the self-hosted integration runtime is also allowing a secure way to copy the data from within a private network into the cloud. Another important thing is that with this setup, when you're running cloud migration from on-prem database, there's no need of a NST installation. At this point, all that is needed is only the database. So let's move next. Let's figure out what's happening specifically when we are initiating the cloud migration setup phase, when we are in this page in the product that Nicola has just shown us before. So The very first thing is about registration of the integration runtime with the Azure Data Factory. In the backend, we actually use load balancing mechanism so that we have a set of Azure Data Factories available, and we always try to find the best one that is the most suitable for running your own cloud migration. So when we find a proper Azure Data Factory to link your integration runtime with, we reserve one, and then that will exchange an authentication key. That will be the one that is indeed inserted in the cloud migration setup. And at this point, the Azure Data Factory and your integration runtime are linked. So next step is the creation of a preparation pipeline. That's what we will proceed with. And this is basically responsible of performing some checks both on the on-premise database and on the Business Central Online database. So we rely on the integration runtimes to perform these checks. What are these specifically? So we, for example, want to check that the connectivity to the database works correctly. We want to check that the versions of the databases are also compatible, and the compatibility level, for example. So when these checks succeed, we create a set of stored procedures, and these also will take care, for example, on one side on-prem to retrieve the list of tables to be copied, and on SaaS we want to, for example, retrieve the list of installed extensions. Next step, we create a replication pipeline, and we provide as an input to this pipeline the information that we just collected. So indeed, the list of tables that have to be migrated and instructions for how to migrate them. So this information is provided as a metadata for this pipeline. But we will not yet run this pipeline at this point. We just leave it there sitting ready to be run. So at this point, if all the checks succeed and everything worked fine, with the preparation pipeline, we mark the online environment as correctly set up. So we conclude the setup step, and we are ready to proceed to the next phase. So there's one important thing to call out, because since these stored procedures will actually apply some changes to the on-prem database, we highly recommend to try the cloud migration for the first time on a backup of the production database. So that was it for the introduction of the setup of cloud migration. We move on to the next step that can answer some common questions and a further setup that needs to be done before actually starting to replicate our data. So the very first thing is a common question that could be, what is the best choice between migrating from an on-prem database or an Azure SQL database? So based on some very recent improvements that we have applied throughout the last year, we can safely claim that the migrations from Azure SQL are a very stable and fast way to replicate your data. They overcome some limitations that would be not very straightforward to accomplish with the on-prem setup, for example, replication of SQL variant fields. And also, because of memory and performance optimizations, they can also handle replication of large images into single fields. However, of course, Azure SQL database is not a free service, so it comes with a downside of being charged for this service as long as the database is online and active. We do recommend, because of the high volume of data being transferred, to choose a service tier that can satisfy high compute and input-output requirements. So next, one important thing to remember as well when we're working with cloud migration is that if there's any available updates for the environment in the admin center, we strongly recommend to postpone them to a later date so that they don't interfere with the cloud migration that we're working on. Because if that happens, actually, that the environment gets updated while cloud migration is still enabled, we would forcefully stop cloud migration, and then you would be forced to start over again, deleting the environment and starting from scratch. Another important recommendation that we have, although is optional, is to set up application insights telemetry on your environment. This can also be achieved from the admin center. And it is particularly important because if you do set it up, then you have telemetry available for all the flows that involve cloud migration. So we will see towards the end of the presentation some specific use cases where telemetry can actually be useful. Yeah, so now we look into the next feature that is table mappings. So let's figure out what exactly table mappings mean. So essentially, the aim of table mapping is to move custom fields to table extensions in SaaS. And this is specifically because on-prem, you're allowed to customize base tables, but in SaaS, we are not. So we want to provide you the ability to migrate also these extra fields to SaaS. The replication engine will also take care of splitting the data, if needed, across multiple table extensions. And the only very important requirement at this point is that the field names and data types must match always between on-prem and SaaS. So to give also a better visual representation of how this works, we have a scenario where indeed in SaaS we are customizing the customer table. Besides having the Microsoft fields, we also have some additional fields. And while running cloud migration, we actually figure out that we would like to migrate some of the fields, while some other fields we're not interested in them, so we could leave them on-prem without migrating them. But on SaaS, indeed, we cannot customize the base customer table, so we can only have the Microsoft fields there. So the goal here is to indeed migrate the additional fields into table extensions that are owned by PTEs. And with regards to the Microsoft fields, the mapping of these fields between on-prem and SaaS happens automatically thanks to the replicate data property set to true. And this will indeed take care of replicating the fields just because the field names and types exactly match. So the migration table mapping feature instead will be the one taking care of copying the custom fields to the target tables, again, if the field names and types match. It is important to call out, however, as Nicola mentioned before, that the fields in the on-prem table will have to be renamed so that they match exactly the fields in SaaS. So since in SaaS the fields in the table extensions will have a prefix, this change must also be reflected on-prem. So now it's time to demonstrate it live, and I will hand over back to Nicola so he can give a live demonstration of this feature in the product.
Thank you, Ricardo. So if you would like to use this feature, it's also accessible from the Cloud Migration Management page, and it's called Managed Custom Tables. So if you open it from here, you could define the migration table mappings in this UI here by just inlining the table definition. However, we have seen that this process was error-prone for many users that were trying to use this functionality. So instead, I would recommend to use a dedicated page that we have introduced, which is called Add Table Mappings. So if you invoke it here, it's going to open. So here on this page, the only thing that you need to provide in the first part is the name. And if you would like to provide it in a way so it is not error-prone, in SQL, if you take the entire table name like this, using the square brackets together, and if you copy-paste it here, you will see that it is automatically going to parse the values, and it will auto-complete the other two fields, which is the data per company and the app ID. Also, if you do it like this, you will see that it is escaped in SQL, so it is not containing slash. So the next thing that I would need to do here is to select that we are mapping to the table extensions. You can filter the list here. And the only thing that I need to do is to select to which table extension I want to move the date. And in this case, it would be the PTE one. Now, I could do this 3 times, one by one, inserting one line by one. However, the UI is supporting multi-select. And as you have seen in Ricardo's example, we do want to split it into 3 extensions. So I'm going to select all 3 extensions. And if I invoke OK, it's going to automatically insert 3 mappings. So this is saving you a lot of clicks. Then let's do a customer. So if I would go to a customer table, I would simply select a customer here. And if I go here and I do the add table mappings, and here on the customer, I can select it. And if I invoke OK, I got 3 custom records as well. So by doing this simple definition in less than a minute, I'm able to split 2 main tables into 3 table extensions without writing any code. To show you one small thing here, if we take an actual database that is not CIL database, so CIL tables databases, they do not have the extension ID, but in AL, this extension is going to have an extension ID behind it. And if you copy it with the square brackets, and when you tab, you can see it is able to parse out the app ID. So it's just an example how it is going to prevent mistakes during the data entry. One functionality that you have here is that you can export the definitions. It's going to give you a JSON file that you can import later, so you don't need to type in the definition multiple times. Also, you're able to provide these table mappings programmatically if you subscribe to the on-insert default table mappings event from Code Unit 4001 Hybrid Cloud Management. So if you're a large partner that have a customized ISV solution and you would like to automatically split these table mappings, you can do it by code as well. And then each time when we complete the wizard, we are going to update the table mappings. All right, so that was all. Back to you, Ricardo.
Yep. So now let's talk about some things that we want to call out, still related to the setup step, although we will not go into a lot of details here because there will also be the what's new in cloud migration session that will elaborate more into details. Yeah, so the first thing is that we want to call out the ability now to selectively include or exclude tables from the cloud migration. So the base rule here is that you are allowed to change the setting for the tables that are not classified as sensitive, and in principle any table that you can write a PTE on based on, then you will be able to change the setting for such table. Again, we will have this session where we'll look into more specific details. The other feature is the ability to keep user permissions while the cloud migration is set up, because until now the default behavior was that whenever a cloud migration is set up, we remove user permissions from any existing user, and you are able now to disable this default behavior and always keep the permissions. So this could be particularly useful for scenarios where, for example, service-to-service authentication is needed, or for the unsupported scenario. So we don't really recommend doing this, but moving additional companies after going live. So everything we've seen so far is also possible for delegated admins. So in principle, it will always be a licensed super user that is able to perform the cloud migration setup and all the actions that follow. But if you're a delegated admin logged into the customer's environment, for example, you can perform such actions, but we will ask you to get permission from a licensed user. So specifically when you log in, you will be prompted with this screenshot where you will be provided a link that the customer will have to go to be able to grant consent for you as a delegated admin to run cloud migration. Or alternatively, we also have a small demonstration of how this could happen if you're logged into the environment as a licensed user with super permissions. Then it is as easy as using page search and going to the delegated admin consent for cloud migration. Here you will be able to grant consent for a delegated admin. We log who has granted consent. And similarly, we can also revoke the consent. And this is mainly needed for security reasons, because if you want to grant consent to an admin at any point you want to revoke this consent, you should be able to do that still from this page. But if that's the case, then the cloud migration that is currently running will stop. So we jump to the next section now, and we will talk about how exactly is the data replicated. So let's again look into a more schematic way to figure out what exactly happens when we click on Run Data Replication under the Cloud Migration Management page. So at this point, we have this visualization that shows again all the parties involved. We are using again Azure Data Factory pipelines, and as we told you about earlier, at the end of the setup phase, we had a replication pipeline that was ready to be run. So this is the moment when clicking on Run Data Replication, we actually start running this replication pipeline. So the main thing to call out here is that there is an Azure Blob Storage component that is used for staging area. And actually, let's assume for now that this replication is occurring when there is an on-premise SQL Server database as a source. So the Azure Blob Storage staging area allows us to compress the data so that we have a lower volume of data to be transferred to the cloud, and this actually brings some optimizations with regards to the speed that it takes. So the integration runtime on-premise will perform some checks on the tables on-premise, because the goal is to figure out the data structure of the tables, and based on this, figure out how to actually perform the copy of the tables to the cloud. So for the large tables, for such tables that we identify as large, meaning that the size exceeds 250 megabytes, or there's more than 100,000 rows, we will perform table copy one by one, exactly copying the table from the source to the destination. For all the other tables that don't classify as large, we will perform bulk copy. And what does this mean? We will actually gather all these tables together, we will compress them, we will chunk the records, serialize everything into a huge JSON, and perform and actually copy all the content into a single table, ad hoc table that is used for this purpose, and then migrate only this table to the cloud. And then the integration runtime in the cloud will take care of performing the exact opposite, so decompressing, deserializing, and filling the records in the original tables. So the very first replication run will take everything that is currently on the on-premise database and migrate it fully to the cloud. But this doesn't mean that you cannot perform any more replications, because you can still add or edit data on-premise, and we rely on SQL change tracking mechanism to keep track of the changes and then perform additional replication runs only on the deltas. So this allows you to perform incremental changes and migrate only what's new every time to the cloud. Now, everything that we saw here is exactly possible also if you have an Azure SQL database as a source, but it's important to call out a very big improvement that we've made throughout this last months, which is the removal of the need for the Azure Blob Storage staging step for Azure SQL. And why is that? This is actually the reason why we bring some performance improvements that I called out earlier during the presentation, because we don't need anymore to compress or decompress the data and store it into this stage. And the main benefits here are mainly performance improvements, but also this process overall is less error prone, because we reduce the risk of hitting errors related to the Azure Blob Storage infrastructure. Great, so that was it when it comes to how is the data replicated. Now back to Nicola to show you what the new UI looks like.
So to understand how the new UI is looking like, it is basically split into two parts. On the top, you can see the entire status for your entire replication. So you can see that it is ready to pull additional data in. You can see how many tables were successful. You can see all of the tables that you currently have issues. There are 5 tables that require your attention. And you can also see how many companies you have replicated and how many companies are there in total in the on-prem database. Below the overall status, you can see the list of all of the actions that you did to this environment. And basically, this is just a log of steps that you have done. And for all of the replications that had a problem with them, they are clearly marked as failed, so you can investigate what happened. Now, if you do a quick maths, you will see that here we have around 8 failed tables, and here we are reporting 5 tables only. So if you're wondering what is happening, so for example, if we drill down here, you can see that this table has failed in this specific replication. However, the overall status is successful. And the reason for this is because there is a later run that has successfully replicated the data. So if you ever encounter an issue with data replication, the way to fix it is if you look into the error, fix the error, and you simply just invoke another data replication, and then the data is going to be fixed. If you would like to see what actually happened, you can invoke this show all replications action, and you will see that there is one failed run, and 4 hours later there was a successful run that successfully copied the data. So that was all regarding the error overview. If you would like to look at the companies that were replicated, and if you're looking which companies you're missing, you can easily filter on the list here and say, show me all of the companies that are not replicated. And now we can show you all of the companies that you didn't move from on-prem. You can simply select them from here, and then they are going to be created, and you can invoke another replication. We are not going to do that now, so we are just going to exit without making any changes. You can also look at the data that was successfully replicated by using this page here. You're able to filter per company, And one of the things that is very useful to look at is per database tables. Because these tables are sensitive, and the risk is that they can get overwritten. And one of the main tables is the tenant media table. So here it is actually expected to get a difference, because we are going to always delta sync the tables that are per database. We are not going to replace them. One of the tables that you cannot get the information about is the upgrade tags, and the reason for this is because it is internal, and unfortunately it's not possible to analyze the internal or obsoleted tables. One of the things that you can also do is that you can filter on the table itself. So one of the nice functionality that you can do here is that if I would search for the changelog to see what happened with the changelog, because I didn't get any data, and if I select the changelog entry here, the system is going to tell me that the changelog is not included in the replication because it is marked with replicate data false. And this is one of the tables that we got a lot of requests to include in some of the cases for the cloud migration. So you will be able to use this new functionality for including or excluding that we will cover about in what's new. Then the next thing that you can do is that you can complete the cloud migration, and we also have the options of pausing and abandoning the cloud migration. The only difference between these two actions is that you are telling us in which state the tenant is. If you're pausing, it means that you want to continue it. If you're abandoning it, it means most likely that you want to delete the tenant. Both actions are fully recoverable, so if you regret abandoning, you can simply just configure the cloud migration again and continue using it. There is not going to be any consequences of invoking a different action. Okay, so that was all about the new UI. So back to you, Ricardo, regarding the limitations.
Yes, that was very cool. So let's have a closer look into some of the limitations that currently exist for the cloud migration. So in theory, when you have an environment in SaaS, we enforce a strong limit of 300 companies. That is mainly for performance reasons, but we do recommend something like around 250 companies so that you have room to grow over time if you need to add more companies. When it comes to the data instead, in principle, we don't really have a limit, so you can potentially replicate as much data as you want, even exceeding the default allowed storage capacity that exists in SaaS. But be aware, however, that if you do so, any administrative operations that involve, for example, creation of new environments or copying of the existing environments that basically affect the storage capacity will be prevented. So you will not be able to perform these operations. And if you do exceed the quota, then when you go live, you are forced to purchase additional storage capacity. Great, so let's look now into the next step of the data upgrade and how it works. So back to Nicola for this.
Thanks, Ricardo. So here we are going to cover the two topics. The first topic is how the upgrade works, and the second is the new functionality that we will cover in another video, and that one is skipping API upgrade because this one is taking a long time. So upgrade step needs to be invoked as an absolutely last step in the cloud migration. And the reason why is because once you invoke the upgrade, you will not be able to do additional replications or to move additional companies into the SaaS tenant. And if this happens for you, you will either need to point-in-time restore or start over. Simply delete the environment and replicate all of the companies together. So the reason why we introduced this strong rule is because we are replicating and also upgrading the per database tables. And once we upgrade the per database table, we simply cannot allow additional pulls into this table because we are risking that we are going to get half upgraded data in the per database table. And we also cannot know which records already were upgraded and which were not. Thus, we are risking many data corruptions if we allow running multiple upgrades and multiple replications. Also, we have seen that many partners would pull the data from on-prem, change it in SaaS, tweak it a little bit, and then they would pull it from on-prem again. And we would strongly advise not to do this. While you're pulling the data from the on-prem system, do not change the data in SaaS database, because you're risking that your changes are going to be overwritten or you're also risking that you will confuse the replication engine, so it is not going to pick up some changes that it should. Our strong recommendation is to change the data in a single place. So while you're replicating from on-prem, do not change it in SaaS. If you change it in SaaS, do not pull the data from on-prem again. Regarding how the upgrade works, we simply invoke the regular upgrade flow and we ignore the versioning, so we are going to run all of the upgrade code units. This also means that we are going to put the tenant into the maintenance mode, as you have seen in the demo, cut the access, make sure that there is a single session to prevent any database locks and to make sure that upgrade is going to run smoothly. We are going to trigger the upgrade for all of the apps that are installed on the tenant. And in case of the failures, we are going to roll back the data so you can delta sync or fix the data and invoke the upgrade again. If you have a custom PTE or an app source app, there is nothing special that you need to do. We will also invoke your upgrade code as we are invoking first-party upgrade code. One of the things that we strongly recommend is that once you're done with the replication, is to test the upgrade in a separate sandbox environment. So if you're replicating to sandbox or to a production, you can copy it to a different sandbox and then test the upgrade there, of course, if you're not over the data size limits. And if you do it like this, then in case the upgrade runs longer than expected, you can still use the other instance to do the application, to do the additional replications or invoke a different upgrade. So in the last two versions, we have optimized over 30 long-running upgrade methods, so it takes less time to get to the version 21 or 22 than it took to get to the version 19. So we are always recommending to upgrade to the latest version. We are also monitoring how long the upgrade takes, so we are going to be optimizing long-running upgrade methods once we detect them in SaaS. One of the long-running upgrade methods that is usually taking a lot of time for the large tenants is API-related upgrade. For the APIs, we needed to run the upgrade because we need to pre-compute the data so the APIs can be fast. And for this reason, because we are running it on large tables like customers, items, sales invoices, it is usually time-consuming. For this reason, we have introduced the functionality so you can run it after the cloud migration. We have a dedicated page that you can use to invoke the background jobs to upgrade this data. So it's safe to run after the cloud migration. Thus, we are recommending to skip this step. And we are going to be talking about it more in the What's New session. So after you're done with the upgrade, you're ready to complete the cloud migration and to go live. And before going live, we strongly recommend to do extensive testing in Sandbox. Then you can complete the cloud migration. There is a functionality that you can use to set up and map users. And also as the last step, you should configure the integrations, namely API and Dataverse syncs. So setup users is the standard functionality that you can use from the users list. So you can invoke, get users from O365 there and configure permissions. And once you're done with this step, you can go to the cloud migration page and open the define user mappings page. And here you have the ability to map the on-prem users to the SaaS users. And when you invoke OK, then we are going to go through all of the tables which are using username. And it is important for business logic, for example, my items, approvals functionality or timesheets, and many others as well. And we are going to go through this data and update the username, so it is going to work in SaaS. One important thing to note here is that you can do it only once per environment, so you should do it as the last step, because you will not be able to run it twice. And as a post-step, you can configure the database. And as a post-step, you can configure the Dataverse integration again and make sure that the mappings are correct and run the API upgrade as I have been talking during the upgrade part. So one of the frequently asked questions that we often get is, can we move additional companies in live tenants? And the answer is we do not officially support it, and we strongly advise against it. Because our strong recommendation to you is to move all of the companies to SaaS and to go live with all of the on-prem companies. However, we do understand that in some cases it's not possible, or the customer changes their mind after going live. So it is possible to move additional companies in live tenants. However, you're doing it on your own risk. It is the same as running rapid start or using any kind of PTEs to fix the data. In case any errors happen, you will need to fix it yourself, because we will not be able to help you to patch the customer data. We will write the dedicated documentation topic that it will explain to you how you can do this safely. So make sure that you check out the documentation in case you need to do this. All right, Ricardo, can you show us the troubleshooting?
Great. So, of course, assuming everything goes fine with your cloud migration setup and replication runs, you wouldn't need to probably check any troubleshooting documentation, but we do have a lot of resources available online that collect actually some of the most common errors that you may hit throughout the process of cloud migration. There's a more generic page about troubleshooting, but also we do collect some of the most common issues that can occur either during the setup or the replication phase. So very useful resources. Most likely the solution for the error you're looking for is already in these pages. And then when it comes to telemetry, I already said earlier what are the requirements to enable telemetry, but assuming you do have telemetry, then we do collect some of the partner-facing telemetry events on this table just for convenience, but they are also available in this documentation page. And as we can see, we actually capture pretty much all the important events that can happen throughout the cloud migration process, both when you're setting up cloud migration or starting the replications, completing the replications, or when any errors occur. So very useful as well to surface telemetry on your side. And a convenient use case, if you have telemetry enabled, is of course to use the Power BI report app available on AppSource. If we drill down into this app, specifically we can see that it has a cloud migration tab. And this one can become very convenient if you, for example, are also running cloud migration across different environments and you want to inspect what is the status of the migrations throughout the environments. It also provides an aggregated overview of any errors that occurred throughout cloud migration for the different environments and some interesting KPIs as well. And more interestingly as well, without the need for you to log into the environment and actually use the web client to inspect the logs for the cloud migration, you can also inspect them from here directly in the Power BI app. So that's also very convenient and useful. Last but not least, it's also interesting that you can set up alerts and email notifications based on such telemetry events. Again, these are some of the most common cloud migration events, but they are fully documented in the pages that we have linked. And not only you can receive email notifications, but also, for example, set up teams to receive such notifications. Very, very simple and straightforward. Again, fully documented in our documentation.
All right, so that was all for today. And before we end the presentation, we would like to ask you to try out the cloud migration. There is no need to wait. You can just take a database and test the cloud migration to a sandbox. We are often getting questions from the partners. How much space is the database going to take, or how much time is it going to take to replicate and upgrade the database? You can simply just take the database and try it out to a sandbox and see for yourself, because it's going to take less space. And depending on the data structure, it depends how long time is it going to take to replicate and upgrade.
So, of course, don't forget to set up the telemetry. As we've seen, it is also a very useful source of information that can help you troubleshoot issues along the way. And of course, always rely on the documentation. That's probably the most useful resource that you have available online.
Yes, and we will be updating it on the timely basis. And as the last step, you can join us on Yammer, where you can ask us additional questions or provide feedback. So we will be there to support you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.